Burkina Faso's military leader will remain in power until 2029. Ibrahim Traoré was due to hand over leadership to a civilian government in July, but a new charter has extended the transitional period by another 5 years. Traoré assumed power after staging a coup in 2022. He's repeatedly warned that holding elections would be difficult because of security challenges. Around half of Burkina Faso's territory remains outside of government control. Well, let's bring in Nicholas Hack. He's across this for us from Dakar. Nick, can you tell us a little bit more about Traoré's decision? Here I understand there was some kind of consultative process, but presumably there is some domestic fallout.
What if I told you that just 3 years ago, Burkina Faso was on the verge of becoming a failed state, that entire villages were abandoned, schools were shuttered, and people lived in fear of terrorists more than they trusted their own government? That was Burkina Faso before Captain Ibrahim Traoré. This landlocked West African country, rich in gold, cotton, and resilience, was reduced to begging for survival. France's shadow loomed large. Multinational companies plundered gold reserves while ordinary Burkinabé struggled to afford food. The capital, Ouagadougou, was buzzing with foreign embassies and NGOs, but in the countryside, families were burying sons lost to jihadist attacks.
At least 6 people are dead following attacks in Burkina Faso. The attacks have been attributed to jihadists and took place in the northern part of the country. Several hundred people took to the streets over the weekend to protest the wave of attacks sweeping the country. And joining us now is our Wasim Nasser. Wasim, what can you tell us about these attacks?
Well, actually, the situation is very, very critical, even as we speak. And if you go back just a few days back, we can see on a map where the latest attack occurred, knowing that those attacks were made or conducted by the Islamic State or by Al-Qaeda affiliate. So we see the attack on the 12th in Yakuta, meaning
spearheaded by a 34-year-old captain barely known to the outside world, lit a fire under the nation. Traoré didn't just take power, he ignited something raw, something millions had been craving: dignity. His speeches were short, sharp, and unpolished, but they rang with defiance. "We will no longer kneel," he declared, and that single phrase captured the frustrations of generations. The contrast between then and now is staggering. Before Traoré, Burkina Faso's economy was a hostage. Its gold flowed outward, its policies were dictated from Paris, Brussels, and Washington. Now the country is repositioning itself as the beating heart of a new African independence movement. Factories are opening where NGO food drops once defined the landscape. The military, once fractured and dependent on foreign training, is manufacturing its own weapons and vehicles. But here's the question no one dares ask out loud. How sustainable is this revolution? Can a small, embattled nation like Burkina Faso truly sever ties with the West without plunging into isolation and collapse? Or will this defiance spark the beginning of something much larger, a continental rebellion against dependency? Stick with me, because in the next part, we'll dive deep into the before and after realities of Burkina Faso's security crisis, the battlefield where Traoré's leadership is most starkly tested. Before we move forward, I want to hear from you. Do you think Traoré's revolution is genuine liberation or just another cycle of military power dressed up as hope? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more people see this story. Before Captain Ibrahim Traoré rose to power, Burkina Faso was a country fighting for its very survival and losing. Between 2016 and 2022, Burkina Faso slipped into a nightmare that many outside Africa barely noticed. The jihadist insurgency that had begun in neighboring Mali spilled across borders like wildfire. Al-Qaeda-linked groups and ISIS affiliates didn't just attack military outposts. They targeted schools, churches, mosques, and markets, leaving families shattered.
Hello, I'm Kendra Von Esch of Shalom World, bringing you the news from around the globe. A group of gunmen burned down a Catholic church during the Holy Mass last Sunday and killed at least 6 people, including a priest in the West African nation of Burkina Faso. The attackers burst into the church and started shooting at the beginning of Mass and set fire to local businesses, all while the local residents remained locked in their homes for safety. This attack is among 3 others within the last 5 weeks in this country, which has been suffering terrorist attacks for some time. The assailants have not been captured, and the motive is not yet determined. However, it is believed that Islamic jihadist groups are behind the attack.
Soldiers in Inata were slaughtered after begging for supplies that never came. Their last messages to superiors, "We have no food, no ammo," were ignored. For many citizens, that tragedy became the symbol of a failed state. The presence of French forces under Operation Barkhane did little to ease the situation. While France insisted it was in the Sahel to fight terrorism, Burkinabe communities saw French convoys passing by destroyed villages without intervening. Rumors spread that Paris cared more about protecting its mining interests than Burkinabe lives. Protests erupted in Ouagadougou with placards reading, "France dégage, France get out." That was the before. Now, under Traoré, the landscape looks very different. His decision to expel French troops in 2023 shocked the world but electrified Burkinabe citizens. For decades, foreign military partnerships were treated as untouchable. By kicking France out, Traoré declared, "This is our war and we will fight it our way." It wasn't just policy, it was psychological warfare against dependency. The army is no longer left to rot. Burkinabe factories, some converted from old warehouses, now produce weapons, bulletproof vests, and armored vehicles. They may not match Western equipment in polish, but they embody independence. Soldiers no longer feel like beggars waiting for foreign aid. They feel like defenders armed by their own nation. Then came the mobilization of the Volontaires pour la Défense de la Patrie, VDP, ordinary citizens trained and armed to defend their communities. Farmers turned fighters, market traders became sentries. Critics fear these civilian militias could spiral out of control, but for now, they are a lifeline in areas where state security was absent. And it's working. In provinces like Bam and Yatenga, where jihadists once controlled roads, Burkinabe forces have reclaimed territory. Schools once closed for years are reopening. Farmers are returning to fields abandoned out of fear. Displaced families, though cautious, are trickling back to their villages. The tide hasn't turned completely, but the bleeding has slowed. But victories have costs. Human rights groups accuse the military and VDP of harsh tactics, sometimes punishing entire villages suspected of harboring militants. Traoré responds bluntly, "We are in a war for survival. Mistakes will be corrected, but surrender is not an option." His tone reflects a leader who sees criticism from abroad as luxury talk while his people face annihilation. Then there's Russia. After expelling France, Traoré turned to Moscow. Russian advisors, weapons, and possibly Wagner-linked operatives now support the Burkinabe fight. This has drawn global attention, with the West accusing Traoré of opening the door to new colonizers. Yet many Burkinabe argue, better a new partner who respects us than an old master who exploits us. The truth is, the insurgency is not gone. Jihadists still strike, sometimes with deadly precision. Just this year, attacks in the east killed dozens of civilians. But the difference lies in confidence. Before Traoré, people whispered about collapse. Now they speak of resilience. Before, soldiers begged for ammo. Now they march with home-built rifles and renewed purpose. Before, Burkina Faso was seen as a victim. Now it is a fighter. The stakes remain enormous. If Traoré fails, the nation could slide back into chaos. But if he succeeds, even partially, Burkina Faso may become a model for how African nations can take back control of their security. Next, we move to another battlefield. One fought not with bullets but with contracts and trade deals. The economy. Because if the military fight is about survival, the economic fight is about dignity. Burkina Faso's story cannot be told without its economy, because it reveals the cruelest irony of all. Before Traoré, Burkina Faso was the fourth largest gold producer in Africa. Yet if you walked the dusty streets of Kaya or Dori, you wouldn't have seen gold wealth, you'd have seen poverty. Children fetching water from wells, women selling vegetables in small bowls, families surviving on less than $2 a day. Where did the gold go? Straight into the vaults of foreign companies. French, Canadian, and multinational corporations extracted billions each year, while Burkina Faso received crumbs in taxes and royalties. The deals were humiliating. One Canadian company paid less than 5% of its profits in local taxes. Another exported gold directly to Switzerland while Burkinabe schools went without chalk. When locals protested unsafe mining conditions, security forces often defended the companies instead of the people. Cotton, known as the country's white gold, told the same story. Farmers worked from sunrise to sunset, yet global prices, set in London and New York, kept them poor. Many fell into debt just to buy seeds and fertilizers. The before Burkina Faso was a textbook example of what economists call the resource curse, a nation rich in natural wealth but trapped in dependency. Add to this the crushing weight of imports. The bread in Ouagadougou bakeries relied on imported wheat. Hospitals depended on imported medicine. Even matches, soap, and school notebooks often came from abroad. That was the old cycle: extract, export, import, repeat. Now, under Traoré, the tone has changed. He speaks not of aid or partnerships, but of sovereignty. In 2023, his government launched the country's first state-controlled gold refinery. Instead of shipping raw ore to Europe, Burkina Faso now refines part of its gold at home, retaining more value and asserting ownership. The message was clear: our wealth must serve us first. Beyond gold, factories are rising. A once-abandoned textile mill in Koudougou now hums with machines producing uniforms for soldiers and VDP fighters. Small industrial parks are producing soap, cooking oil, and even tractors. These aren't flashy mega-projects, but they chip away at dependency. Agriculture, too, is shifting. Traoré has encouraged farmers to embrace traditional grains like millet and sorghum, which thrive in the Sahel climate, instead of relying solely on imported wheat. Pilot programs distribute improved seeds and provide small-scale irrigation kits. Food sovereignty, once a dream, is becoming policy. But perhaps the most radical change is psychological. For decades, Burkinabe leaders signed contracts like junior partners. Now, the government openly cancels or renegotiates mining agreements. In some cases, it has threatened outright nationalization. This has rattled investors, but thrilled ordinary citizens who long believed their leaders served foreign capitals more than Ouagadougou. The risks, however, are real. By cutting ties with France and alienating Western investors, Burkina Faso risks scaring off capital. Its pivot toward Russia and Turkey offers alternatives, but whether these deals are fair or exploitative remains uncertain. Critics warn that new friends could simply become new exploiters. Time is another challenge. Building factories and restructuring agriculture takes years, but hunger is immediate. People need food, jobs, and hope today, not tomorrow. Yet small victories are visible. In rural areas, solar mini-grids built by local engineers light up villages that once went dark at sunset. Cooperatives now process shea butter, sesame, and rice for local markets, instead of exporting raw materials. Youth entrepreneurs, once dreaming only of migrating to Europe, are opening startups in renewable energy and agribusiness. The economic revolution isn't about turning Burkina Faso into a superpower overnight. It's about breaking the invisible chains of dependency, one link at a time. But here's the sobering truth. Burkina Faso's economy will be the ultimate test of Traoré's revolution. Guns may protect borders, but food and jobs protect legitimacy. If people see their lives improve, if farmers keep their land, miners see fair pay, and children attend better schools, then this revolution will be remembered as real liberation. If not, frustration could consume it. And this battle doesn't stop at the borders, because Burkina Faso's economic defiance is shaking all of West Africa. Which leads us to our final chapter, how this small nation's rebellion is reshaping ECOWAS geopolitics and Africa's future.
Of course, I mean, the reason for not holding these elections given by Ibrahim Traoré, that the security situation has gone from bad to worse, well, for many people in Burkina Faso, they see him as responsible for this current situation. Remember, he came in power in October 2022 during national dialogues, and he said that after 21 months, he will restore power to an elected official, that there would be elections. But what we're seeing now is that he's asking, or he's sought to stay in power for another 60 months. That's another 5 years, and that the situation is really deteriorating. According to Human Rights Watch, just in February, 223 villagers were killed in one day in 2 villages, not by armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL, but by the Burkina Faso forces. Now, he has clamped down on any voices of dissent, whether it be the media, journalists, members of civil society. If they speak out, they're sent to the front line. Now, we spoke to some members of civil society who decided to speak to us on condition of anonymity, and they say that this national dialogue was a waste of time, it was a missed opportunity, and that talking is not enough. They need more action.
When Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced their withdrawal from ECOWAS, it wasn't just a bureaucratic reshuffle, it was a thunderclap across Africa. Before Traoré, Burkina Faso was a compliant member of ECOWAS. Membership meant access to regional trade, development projects, and political legitimacy. But it also meant submission. ECOWAS was often used as a stick by Western powers, threatening sanctions or suspension against governments that dared to challenge the status quo. When jihadist violence surged in Burkina Faso, ECOWAS offered words but little action. When coups occurred, it demanded elections, even when half the territory was under militant rule. To many Burkinabe, ECOWAS symbolized hypocrisy, quick to punish military takeovers, slow to address terrorism, silent on foreign exploitation. That was the before. Now, Burkina Faso is charting a different course. Together with Mali and Niger, it formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. For the first time, countries once labeled weak and unstable are forging a pact of resistance. Military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and even plans for a common currency are on the table. The symbolism is immense. Three nations long dismissed as aid-dependent are daring to say, "We will not kneel." Across Africa, young people cheered. Social media exploded with hashtags praising Traoré, Assimi Goïta of Mali, and Abdourahmane Chiani of Niger as the Sahel Lions. To many, they represent a generational revolt against old politics and foreign tutelage. But the risks are equally huge. By leaving ECOWAS, Burkina Faso faces economic sanctions, trade disruptions, and diplomatic isolation. Already, the country struggles with inflation and border restrictions. Critics argue this path could strangle the economy further. Supporters counter that freedom always carries a price, and that dependency is a slow death anyway. Then there are the secret trade deals. With Western doors closing, Ouagadougou looks to Moscow, Ankara, and Beijing. Russian advisors roam military bases. Turkish firms bid on construction projects. Chinese companies eye mining concessions. For some, this is smart diversification. For others, it is déjà vu, new masters replacing old ones. The question is whether Traoré can secure terms that truly prioritize Burkinabe interests. The ripple effects go far beyond the Sahel. In Ghana, Senegal, and Nigeria, citizens are pressuring their leaders to reconsider ties with France and the West. Pan-African movements are louder than at any point since the days of Kwame Nkrumah and Thomas Sankara. Burkina Faso, once seen as fragile, is now a symbol, a mirror reflecting Africa's frustrations and its hopes. And let's not forget the generational factor. At 36, Traoré represents a radical break from the political gerontocracy. Africa is the world's youngest continent, yet its leaders are often twice or three times the age of the majority population. For millions of African youths, Traoré isn't just a president, he's proof that power can shift to the young. Whether he becomes a lasting leader or just a temporary symbol, he has already rewritten the imagination of African politics. But revolutions are fragile. History warns us that external powers rarely allow such defiance without consequences. Coups, assassinations, economic sabotage, these shadows haunt every radical African leader. Traoré knows this. His speeches often hint at betrayal, urging citizens to defend not just him but the revolution itself. So what does Burkina Faso before Traoré versus now really mean? It means moving from dependency to defiance, from despair to fragile hope, from invisibility to continental influence. It means a poor, landlocked nation daring to ask questions that giant economies avoid. Who owns our wealth? Who controls our future? Who decides if we live on our knees or on our feet? The answers are not yet written, but the very act of asking them has already changed Africa. Now it's your turn. Do you believe Burkina Faso is carving out genuine independence, or is it simply trading one master for another? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this deep dive opened your eyes, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so more people can join the discussion.